Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year to all of our viewers, especially to our mentees in the Pursuing the Esquire program. Happy New Year. I hope that everyone's year has started off well, productive, and hitting those goals that you've set for yourself. If this is your first time, welcome to Legal Lifelines, the panel series by Pursuing the Esquire. My name is Danielle Hardy. I am the founder and CEO of Pursuing the Esquire, as well as an entertainment attorney at Universal Music Group. I'm so excited to have you here today, especially on the day that it is, as it is Inauguration Day, a special moment in history for attorneys of color, especially which are the students in which we, support through Pursuing the Esquire. Minorities, people of color that are going to and through law school. And so we are excited to have the first episode of the new year with none other than attorney Shay M. Lawson. So before we get started, I want to just welcome you again to Protecting Your Ideas IP Law. Just to clarify, this will not be an event where we will be giving any legal advice, but more so advice into how you can get involved with IP law in a realm of industries and practice areas for pre-law, law students, and post-grad. So I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the day. Congratulations to Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, who was sworn in earlier this morning as the first woman, Black, and Asian American woman to be the Vice President of the United States. We are extremely, extremely happy for her. So as we get started, I'm now going to introduce our guest. Our speaker today is Shay M. Lawson, and Shay is an IP and entertainment attorney, and I will be introducing her right now. Shay M. Lawson is an Atlanta-based intellectual property and entertainment attorney. She is a Super Lawyers 2020 Rising Star honoree and was recognized in the top 2.5% of intellectual property attorneys practicing in the state of Georgia. She is the managing attorney at the law firm of Lawson McKinley, where she has negotiated millions in client deals in connection with brands such as Nike, Bravo TV, ABC, Discovery Channel, iHeartMedia, and Microsoft. Shay has become well known in the music industry for protecting the brand and legacies of multi-platinum Grammy award-winning artists, songwriters, engineers, and producers, and has served 2 consecutive terms as board member of the Atlanta chapter of the Recording Academy, where she co-chairs advocacy. Her work protecting clients has been featured by Black Enterprise, Rolling Stone, The Hollywood Reporter, Atlanta Business Chronicle, XO Nicole, and Essence. Welcome, Shay, to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I wanted to, really highlight this area of law as we have seen, as according to the stats, the American Bar Association has released the demographics for IP law, and it's extremely concerning, as I'm sure you are aware. For those on the call, according to the ABA, only 1.8% of all intellectual property lawyers are Black. I know you're used to hearing the 5%, of Black attorneys across the profession, which already is a problem. But to see 1.8% in the field of intellectual property law is especially concerning. But you're a part of that. So why is it important to you to diversify this area of IP?
Wow, I think it's especially important for us to diversify this area because it encompasses ownership, right? And
Mhm.
so if we don't understand intellectual property, and how to protect it, when we're having all of these conversations about how we create the culture and we made this popular and we should be getting paid for X, Y, and Z, we aren't really in those positions to do those things when we don't understand IP, when we don't own the underlying IP, when we don't know how to protect, even if we do have the registrations, when we don't know how to protect and enforce those things. And we know how to protect ourselves best. And so it's just really when we're even identifying it, because sometimes it's a fight when we're talking about like the Fortnite dances and the TikToks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
As technology and culture evolves and we create this culture and we make things popular, sometimes that's a part of the argument too of what really is intellectual property that can be owned by us, even if it's created by us. And so having us leading that conversations as attorneys of color will empower our communities and our culture.
Absolutely. I think diverse representation across every, practice area is critical, especially in the creative arts and business realm, because a lot of times, just as you mentioned, we are the creators, we are the innovators, but we're never as much represented on the council side, to protect those rights. And so I applaud you for being, part of that 1.8%, and coming on this call tonight to inspire those who are listening. As I know in our program, our mentorship program, we do have mentees who are extremely interested in intellectual property law. So you are, inspiring those on the call as well. So just to kind of take you back to the beginning, of your career path, what motivated you to go to law school? Was there a class? Was there, an event in your life that inspired you to go? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's not going to be as thought-provoking or deep as you would anticipate. I have always I've had the same personality as a child. I think most people who end up being as attorneys, we've probably been attorneys at heart since birth. However, one of my absolute favorite movies when I was in high school, and I'm absolutely dating myself, it doesn't even matter, was Clueless. And in Clueless, the main character, her name is Cher, and her dad is an attorney. And Cher lives this really amazing life. And so there's a point in the beginning of the movie, and she says, I bet you're wondering how I live in this house. I bet you're wondering what my family does. And she's like, my dad is an attorney. He's a litigator. And it's actually the scariest kind of lawyer. And I was like, ooh, scary lawyers. That's right up my alley. And so literally, from there, I thought I wanted to be a litigator. And then a little bit later on, when I was in high school, I had some people who went to my school who were then attorneys returning back to talk to students. Um, about environmental issues. And at the time, they represented people from countries that were being exploited by big oil, where these big oil companies were coming in, making deals with the government, exploiting the land, exploiting the natural resources, and they were going in, fighting on behalf of the people to get ownership of their land and their resources, or even share in the oil profits. And I thought, like, that's it. That is when I'm talking about being a mean, scary lawyer, that's what I want to use my mean, scary for. So I actually did like an AP environmental science, like a boarding program my junior year of high school and undergrad. I was a poli-sci major at Hampton University, the real HU. And I did my thesis on the impacts of colonization in Nigerian politics. And when I was in law school, I did my note with the International War Crimes Tribune. So, I mean, this
Wow.
is what I thought that I really wanted to do.
And so when you got to law school, did you find that your law school offered, support for your interests in the form of classes or clinics or opportunities that you could further cultivate this goal of yours?
I will say that I started off at law school at Loyola of New Orleans, and I went there, and they had a phenomenal dean at the time. Michelle Allison Davis was the dean of the law school there, and she personally reached out to me on a multiple occasions because I'd actually applied to the joint JD Masters in Environmental Management program between Vermont Law School and Yale, the University of their Yale's environmental management program.
Okay.
And she reached out to me from Loyola of New Orleans on multiple occasions and just talked about their work with students of color and how much they supported them, how she really wanted me to come there, and they offered me a full ride. And so
Wow.
I went where the money resides. And so I ended up going there, but it absolutely was not for me. That they did, as an institution, they did absolutely support students of color. And the first year of law school is the one of the hardest things I've ever been through in my entire life. And so I am absolutely grateful that there was a really robust network and a really great support system. However, speaking of programming, because it was in New Orleans, it was very focused on Napoleonic law and staying in New Orleans. So there was not the opportunity there. The clinics that they had were, they had one that was called like the Poverty Law Center. And when I was in my first year of law school, that was also the first year the city had opened up after Katrina.
Oh,
And so that was everybody's primary focus. So it was helping people with like land issues, landlord tenant issues, getting signed up for like FEMA disaster relief, immigration issues, family issues. So there definitely wasn't at the time the international aspect that I was looking for, or kind of this anything IP or entertainment related that I could connect to, and it was very focused on the actual region. So I actually ended up transferring schools. So if there's somebody who's in a program that they're not happy at, or a school that they're not happy at, please leave, please transfer. Do not feel, don't feel stuck. I mean, definitely weigh your options, but know that it's not the end of the world if you leave. And so I transferred, and I actually transferred to a higher tier school, and they did have the quality of programming, but the cost was significantly more. So number one, I went from having a full ride and paying nothing, to paying 6 figures every year in education. But for that 6 figures, yeah, absolutely. There were amazing clinics, amazing courses, amazing opportunities. Being able to work with the International War Crimes Tribune and doing research for them, that was because one of our professors had worked there and provided that opportunity for students there. How I ended up transitioning more into realizing that I wanted to do entertainment and things like that, it was because my school offered representing the individual athlete class that covered endorsement and sponsorship deals.
oh, wow.
Yeah, and then the class that I took the same semester along with that was the business of baseball. And after that, I took intro to the music industry. So they did have a lot of robust class that covered a wide span of interest.
And so when you were looking for, that law school to go to, how important was it for you about the scholarship, the location, the offerings and classes and clinics? Because some of our viewers are pre-law, so they'll be, selecting a law school very soon, and, kind of thinking about the decision they have to make about where to attend as a 1L. So what advice would you have to someone who's choosing a law school?
Oh man, hindsight is of course 2020. I would have stayed at Loyola of New Orleans. I would have stayed there. There's nothing I would not give to be debt free right now. To not have 6 figures of student loan debt right now would be amazing. And I think that So number one, you need to consider your own circumstances, your own financial circumstances. And when I decided to leave my scholarship and take on the debt of this top tier school, it was because at that time, lawyers were making a lot of money, an obscene amount of money. And then I graduated into the first recession, like the 08, 09 recession, and law firms had closed. They had delayed offers. I had a friend who had a job offer at the Brooklyn DA's office, but it was deferred for 2 years. And he literally worked at Macy's for 2 years with a law degree, waiting for this offer. And when the 2 years expired, they did bring him on, but that was like the landscape. I summered at a big firm that closed. So that was the landscape. I don't think anybody could have anticipated, that would be it. And that's why I took that gamble, because I thought that I would graduate with a 6-figure job and easily be able to pay down my loans. And it took me a very long time to get on my feet after school, just because of the economic conditions. So I'd say the number one thing that you need to think about when you're determining where you're going to school is your individual situation, and what are the financial options for you, and what are the financial options that are the best for you. I think the next thing that you do need to consider is the programming, and the fact that what you think you're interested in. So you've heard me talk extensively about environmental law and international law, and that's not what I'm doing. And so law school will break the best of you. Law school is the collection of all the smartest people in the class, all in one class. And what you thought that you were great at, what you thought you were going to excel at, might not be it. And so if you think right now you want to, I have a friend who works in entertainment, and all he does immigration, and all he does are visas. So he does visas specifically for athletes and musicians and actors. And so if you go to school thinking you want to focus on immigration law, so you're looking at who has an immigration clinic and classes, and then once you get to law school, you're terrible at that, and you really should be going into criminal justice, it doesn't matter. So I don't think that I would, focus too much on like the clinics and the class offerings. I think that you should focus on just going to a good school, doing well in school, figuring out how you can financially be okay, and then you even out where your school might be lacking in courses and clinics with how you take advantage of your summer opportunities and externships. That is what I would do if I could go back in 2020 hindsight.
I think that's great advice because, it's tough. There's a lot of things that you have to think about when you're choosing the law school. I know for me, I thought about geography. I was coming from New York City, and I applied primarily on the East Coast and the South. So I was thinking, where do I want to live, during law school? Because your environment matters. Even if you're in the building all day or you're in your apartment studying, you still have to live, in that town. And how much is that going to cost? And so I think, you're painting a great picture of all of the variables that go into that decision, outside of the name itself of the school, the recognition it may have, and the scholarship, because, you have to look at the totality of the situation, on an individual basis. So I really like that, advice that you gave. Can you speak a little bit more about the transferring? Because, sometimes we do choose the schools and we get there, like you said, you just find it's not for you, right? It's not for you. It's not what you thought it was going to be, or maybe the environment is not, to your liking. Maybe you get there and the class offerings are just not, there as much, or the opportunities that you thought the school might have for you just aren't really what you're looking for. So generally, you can transfer after 1L for your 2L, and it kind of stops at that point. But what went into your decision making when you said, okay, I want to transfer to another school, and how did you go about, advice on that? Did you talk to your professors? Did you have a mentor? How did that work for you?
A lot of things went into my decision to transfer. So as I mentioned, I went to Loyola of New Orleans right at the moment that New Orleans was opening after Katrina. And it was the first year of law school. And so then I will also add to that I'm from Ohio originally. So I was very far from home. And the rest of my family was in Atlanta where I am now. And so I did my 1L year find myself literally driving from New Orleans to Atlanta every single weekend. I
Wow.
only had one class on Friday. It was at 8 a.m. It ended at 10 a.m. And I would drive immediately from my 10 a.m. to Atlanta, get here at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Atlanta, hang out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, leave Sunday afternoon, make it back to New Orleans around like 9, 10 o'clock at night and start my week. And I was doing that every single week just for like my sanity and my happiness. I think the other thing that was really hard for me was that there are significant, being from the Midwest, there were significant Southern issues that I had not experienced, particularly around being Black. I'm from Cleveland, like I'm from the inner city of Cleveland, and everybody's Black. There was no differentiation between just being Black. Everybody was Black. But then once I got to New Orleans, everybody's not Black. Even if you look at somebody and you decide that they are Black, they're not Black. And New Orleans was the first place I had ever been to where I was significantly treated due to the hue of my skin, like being dark skinned. By other Black people, not just white people, other Black people. There were times where I was asked on numerous occasions, studying in the library for my student ID because they didn't want me to be there, just being questioned consistently about why I was on campus, why I was walking in a particular part of town. I had people in my very close circles who their families considered themselves Creole, and they did not want their child associating with somebody like me, a dark-skinned Black person, and kind of the impact that person was dealing with their own family because we were like literally just friends.
Wow.
And then on top of just the emotional weight of a city that was absolutely decimated, like it looked like a war zone. Like when we came in, there were still tanks. Stuff wasn't really open after sunset. They still had the markings on the doors where they had gone to collect the bodies and stuff. Like, it was that emotional weight and feeling of returning to a city that had been destroyed on top of the emotional weight of the first year of law school and experiencing like this colorism it was emotionally too much for me. And I knew by the time I went home for winter break, I was writing, I was writing my personal statements. And then the other thing was, though, that I am from Cleveland. I'm from the inner city of Cleveland. And a positive thing about New Orleans is that people who are from New Orleans, they love New Orleans. They're not going to give up on their city. When people told them, don't come back, don't rebuild, they were coming back. And I maybe felt like I had given up on my hometown and I had left, and maybe I should go back and I should rebuild. And that was actually what my personal statement was about, and why I was transferring and why I went back home, because I wanted to contribute my human capital to the city that I was from. And I was really inspired by the resilience and the return of the people to New Orleans. So I did not have a mentor. It was it was an emotional decision about when my last straw was, but how I arrived there was very purposeful. And what I knew I wanted to accomplish once I left and went to this other school was also very intentional, due to the ranking, the exposure to employers, being at home, and the cost of living. It was just an overall better move for me. And I did everything over the course of Christmas break.
Wow. I think that's a really amazing story of, inspiration for those who may find themselves in that position. A lot of people talk about choosing a law school and getting through it, but not, taking the minute to reevaluate and say, you know what, I think I want to transfer. I think transferring is not always talked about, in these kind of chats about law school or choosing a law school or getting through it. So I'm really glad that you mentioned this because I'm sure at least one person who's watching may have considered transferring at some point.
Yeah,
May not
I
have been.
definitely think I think there's two sides to the transfer. And so I think a lot of times people talk about transferring in like oh, you can't make the cut, right? And so I actually went from a tier 3 school to a tier 1 school. So I actually like moved up,
Yeah.
from where I was going. So it wasn't like a you can't make the cut. But I do also know on the flip side, somebody who is very successful right now working in the government space, and they really struggled at the school that I transferred to. They actually transferred out and came here to John Marshall Law School
Okay.
in Atlanta that has a much more flexible program. I think they have like a 4-year program or something like that where you can do like part-time and summers.
Oh,
And she really, really thrived when there was a lot less pressure of the full course load. And just like I said, is professionally doing very well. And so, yeah, I think number one, don't be ashamed if you feel like once you got there, you made a bad choice. Really evaluate your options. And if you are somewhere and struggling, maybe that's just not it maybe doesn't have anything to do with your intelligence or whether you're cut out to be an attorney. That might not be the best environment for you. And there could be somewhere else that you could thrive. So don't let your pride or your ego or any fear of shame stop you from going where you will thrive.
no, that's fantastic. Because at the end of the day, anyone can give advice, but for the person who's making that decision, they're the ones who sits in that classroom, right? They're the ones who has to go through those classes, be in that environment 24/7, and get through those 3 or 4 years. So, it's really important to be comfortable in the environment that you have to spend so much time in, at such a highly stressful level. And so I think that was really great. And I hope that our viewers are taking notes because you're dropping a lot of gems tonight for them. So just transitioning a little bit now into your time in law school. So you're in law school, you've made the decision to, pursue certain classes and focuses that I'm assuming encompass IP as well. Well, how did you go after your summer opportunities for the law students on the call who may be looking for, opportunities such as internships or fellowships for the summertime to make the most of your time to build that resume?
So, one of the best things that I participated in was a diversity legal internship program through the local bar association. And so they were at the time seeking more candidates of color, more women to take on opportunities, and it was across spectrum. So you actually submitted your materials directly to the bar association. It was just like your transcript, a writing sample, a resume, and employers from across sectors. So it was private, government, and nonprofit all got an opportunity to look at your resume and interview. And they that was a really great opportunity. And I know a lot of people had great experiences there. So I would tell people, number one, start with your state and local bar associations and see if they have any kind of diversity programming that will assist you with placement at these firms. I would also say that if you don't go to a top tier law school, and these types of employers likely aren't coming to your, on campus days, unfortunately, they are like, you will now get to be presented in front of them through some of these diversity programs. So that is how I was placed at my law firm. I was then invited back a second summer. However, I then had a lot of critiques for how the program was actually being run, and the bar association then hired me as their diversity coordinator.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
so I will, while I was still in law school. So I will also say that is that, and that was, I told you that I graduated in the recession. I did not have a job immediately upon graduation, and kind of some of the similar issues that I had with diversity, the diversity program that I was in, I had about diversity in my own law school amongst professors and students because there were that many of us. And um, though I did not have a job immediately in the legal profession, my law school then hired me on to the admission staff, and I basically did like the HBCU tours and
Oh,
things
wow.
of that sort, and helping people, like doing the first run of the application reviews and things like that for admission. So those are opportunities there. So anyway, my summers, I summered at a pretty big firm. We did pharmaceutical products liability defense. But just like I told you, at the point that I took representing the individual athlete, the business of baseball, music industry, copyright, and trademark, I took all of those classes my 2L year. I pretty much knew that's the space I wanted to move into. When I was in undergrad, there was a gentleman who, at the time that I was a freshman in college, he was a 3L in law school. I had kept in contact with him. Like, how somebody comes and speaks at your school and they're like, you can
Yeah.
stay in contact with me. But I hadn't kept in good contact, but I knew at this point he was now working as the general counsel at the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Nice.
So I actually reached back out to my honors college director for undergrad once I was in law school and said, hey, because, record label, NFL, NBA internships are like almost impossible to come by. Like, you got to know somebody in order to get in sometimes because they're just so highly competitive and so many applicants. And so I reached out to her and I said, hey, he spoke my freshman year. I see that he's a general counsel. I'm in law school. I'm interested in sports and entertainment law. Would you be willing to just introduce me? And she did more than that. She called him up, asked him to let me be an intern for the summer.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that next summer I did. I split my internship between the law firm and the NFL, and I interned at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it was great because it's a city-owned franchise. So it
Mhm.
was a great opportunity to see different types of law. When you say you work in sports and entertainment, to kind of see that he was a sports attorney, but there were player personnel and HR issues. There were stadium suite licensing agreements. There were sponsorship agreements. There were all types of things that were being done under the umbrella of this one franchise that was all going to the legal department. So it was really, really great. And again, so the things that caught my eye and caught my interest were those stadium suite licensing agreements, those endorsements, the IP
Mhm.
stuff of like, how do I use your name? How do I connect with your brand on this? And it was a great opportunity. So I'd say, number one, look at your state bar associations. Number two, take advantage of college connections and alumni connections that you may have to shoot your shot.
No, absolutely. I think that is so important to do. Sometimes when you meet people, they're like, keep in touch. It can be a little intimidating to a student, to should I really reach out? I don't want to be annoying, that kind of tug and that push and pull of how to master that. So moving on in that same context with networking. Networking is essential, as an attorney, especially as an attorney of color in any field, for us to get these opportunities that sometimes are not even posted publicly. They might be an internal referral,
Yes.
which happens a lot, especially in my industry. So, could you share some maybe top three networking tips for law students to think about as they are engaging and trying to build their networks and make their connections? And I just want to remind the audience, we will be having a Q&A in about 10 minutes. So if you have any questions for Shay, definitely drop them in the chat and we will get to them in our live Q&A. So can you give us your top three about networking?
Yeah, I'd say number one, network intentionally. And so go to where you want to, if you know you want to work in sports and entertainment, then maybe you should join BSLA, or you should join Women in Sports and Entertainment as a student member. Join while you're still a student. Don't wait till you
Cheaper.
graduate. So that's number one. Don't wait till you graduate. Join as a student member and be intentional about it. I think the second thing is that once you're actually make a game plan before you are actually in the space. That if you know that they are hosting an event or there's going to be a Zoom like this, Google is your friend. Google something or have something where the person who you want to engage because you want to intern at their place or you're very interested in their career, that now you can approach them with a game plan and say, okay, I know Shay Lawson is going to be at the BSLA mixer, and I see that she did Offset's deal with FaZe Clan. When I walk up to Shay Lawson at this event, I'm going to say, hey, so nice to meet you. I'm Sydney. I'm a 2L. I've been following your career. I saw you did Offset's deal, with FaZe Clan. I'm very interested in esports. I'd love to, kind of hear about how that happened. Boom, like that's gonna catch the person's ear, and engage them on another level. So network with a game plan. And then the last point is always follow up. Like the fortune is in the follow up. And I know to the point that you just made about the concerns about being annoying or being awkward, but I think holiday seasons, the anniversaries of when you meet someone and when the person is in the news are all really great times to reach out that aren't awkward, where it's like, hey, I happy holidays, happy new year. I hope I hope you're staying safe and well. Just wanted to drop a note to say hello. You don't always need to ask for something. You
Yeah.
just need to keep the connection warm.
No, I think that's fantastic. And, just as we're kind of getting out of holiday season, a lot of times we have a slower workflow around holidays, so we're more available to do those chats and to take the time to jump on Zoom, to talk to law students. So definitely capitalize on that if you haven't already. It's still not too late to say a happy new year, to someone. If you want to send that note, especially on LinkedIn. I am a huge advocate of LinkedIn, especially for law students who want to meet attorneys, especially now that everything is virtual. Where pre-pandemic, you might reach out and say, hey, can we grab a coffee? Virtual, you have more access to people and, they're more likely to respond now that we're home. For the most part. So those are really great tips about networking. I hope everyone is taking notes because networking is critical, is as a law student, but also as a practicing, attorney as well. So now I want to move in a little bit to post grad. So now you graduated from law school, you've taken the bar, you passed the bar, and now you're looking at your career. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do on a day to day?
Yeah. On a day-to-day basis, I work in three kind of buckets of work. One is contract review, negotiation, drafting. The second is trademark registrations and enforcement and maybe deal making. And then the third bucket is copyright registrations, enforcement, and deal making. Those are my three buckets on a day-to-day basis. I'm sitting behind a computer. It's not as thrilling as it sounds. It's a lot of typing, a lot of track changes, redlining. I work a lot with teams. And so if my clients are actual personalities, I mostly work with their managers and their agents. So their teams are going out and getting these deals. Most of the time, they're negotiating the key terms of the agreement, or they might come to me and ask my opinion on what I think. Hey, this deal is on the table. How do you feel about these numbers? And sometimes I'll work with the agents and say, hey, no, let's go back and ask for 20. And the agent will go back and, ask for the number. And I'll just kind of be playing the back end, like we call it good cop, bad cop. And then there have been situations recently where we've played both sides against the middle. where the agents have the relationships in the industry with like maybe the producers and the directors and things like that, and they're making their things work on their side, and I'm over here talking to business affairs like, hey, this won't happen if we don't so and so, and so now we're both working
Yeah,
both sides to make something happen for the client. So on days like that, um it's a lot of telephone calls, a lot of emails, things like that, and then making sure what we talked about is actually in the document itself.
absolutely.
And that there's no hidden small print of something that we didn't talk about at all being dropped in there behind closed doors, and that's definitely happened as well. And I think like kind of the smaller things are like the enforcements like that we talked about before the recording started, about like your cease and desist and getting people registered and doing your takedown notices and things like that. So that's typically my day to day.
So, have you found anything that surprised you about your job that you didn't know coming into that you might have to handle?
I guess, I did not anticipate the interesting mix between IP, entertainment, and being the legal side of it and PR.
Okay.
And like how much of a thin line sometimes you're skating between when your client is legally right and for publicity's sake you can't enforce their rights. Like, it's like you don't want to be in a situation like Disney that is blanketly enforcing their rights against a PTA that showed The Lion King illegally. It's like, come on, it's a PTA, they raised $200 and you just hit them with an infringement suit. Like, who who in the enforcement department at Disney was like, not today, PTA, and so like I think that is the significantly surprising thing. I just really quickly, a few years ago, I worked with one of the young ladies that had previously dated R. Kelly. And she, of course, this is, you are skating extremely thin
Yeah.
lines here. And it came to a point that we wouldn't do interviews unless I was present, because there was such a thin line you're skating here with like slander, libel, defamation, really reiterating to your client of like, speak only on what you know. If you were specifically there,
Yeah.
is this an opinion or a fact? And I think that that's the surprising thing about my practice that I didn't realize, is that how often in intellectual property matters, you need to think about the PR side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you raised some really great points because, a lot of times, even with IP, it's entangled in different areas of law. And so you find yourself kind of, the way you framed it, measuring the business interest versus the legal interest. And sometimes they clash. And so as counsel, we're coming from the legal space of, no, this is your right and we need to do this. But, we do find those competing interests that don't always present themselves right away or, make sense from a
Mhm.
legal standpoint. So that's a really great point that you shared. Um, Before we start wrapping up, just again, I wanted to remind everyone to drop some questions in the chat if you have them. If not, I'm happy to keep talking to Shay myself. But if you have any questions for her, if you're interested in IP, this is your opportunity to talk to an IP attorney that has a substantial workload, that works with top clients on a one-on-one basis. So drop your chat questions, and we'll have a member of our team will facilitate the Q&A in a few minutes. So Shay, I wanted to also move on to some advice about getting that foot in the door to working in IP. So we do have some 3Ls on the call who'll be graduating really soon, which is exciting. But I'm sure they're nervous about how to go about landing that first job or where they should be looking. What should they be, taking into consideration in the job search post grad? We are in the pandemic. Again, that's something that throws a bit of a curveball sometimes. So, what's some advice for, our 3Ls or our post grads who are looking to get their foot in the door in IP?
Man, I hope that you used your time in school wisely. Yeah, I hope that it's going to be very difficult to get your foot in the door and say that you want to work in IP, but you didn't take copyright, you didn't take trademark, you did not participate in any kind of internships that gave you those types of exposures, and now you're all the way at 3L or post grad. That's going to be really difficult. So I hope the people who are still 1Ls, 2Ls, and yet to go to law school hear that and take that to heart. And if you find that you are a 3L or post grad and you're in a situation like that, then I would behoove you to take advantage of the fact that we are in a pandemic and maybe attempt to volunteer with some kind of nonprofit or something like that, a law school, and get that kind of relevant experience to put on your resume. Take advantage of the fact that it's a pandemic and take online courses. There are Alt Legal does webinars almost every week about great topics in IP. So even if you miss the boat in law school, go ahead and take these online courses. The CLEs sometimes allow those who have not taken the bar to just attend. Of course, you won't get any kind of credit, but they want your money. So sometimes they will let you take these courses, and that can kind of supplement the fact that this doesn't appear on your transcript. And now you can add a whole new section to your resume that says relevant coursework or relevant courses and instruction. And now you have like cannabis law, esports, advanced search in trademark. And so those are the types of things that I really think you need to do is number one, having the right experience on your resume to get in the door. Number two, again, getting in the door. Don't underestimate working for a nonprofit or a smaller company, like a startup company or something like that, so that you can get the experience, because a startup might not have the money to pay a full-time attorney. Sure. They will have, money for somebody who's looking to get their foot in the door. You can leverage and negotiate for some kind of equity. And if that startup really takes off, that could be a very great opportunity for you on both sides, that you got the IP experience that you were looking for and you have equity in a company that has value. So I think that those would be my key pieces of advice. Make sure that you have the experience to even get your foot in the door. And two, don't underestimate the ability to get your foot in the door by looking at nonprofit opportunities and startup opportunities.
That was fantastic. I couldn't have asked a better question to wrap up the end of our chat. I think that's great. And it's encouraging advice, to those who may not have had the opportunity to take those classes, if their law school didn't offer them or they just weren't able to intern as much as they'd like. I think those are really great, pieces of advice to even do post grad to make yourself stand out in the job search, when it comes to IP in any industry. As IP is everywhere. I think that's one misconception sometimes, that IP is just in entertainment or sports. It's everywhere, and every business has IP. So I think that's really great. And I hope our listeners are continuing to take notes on everything that we mentioned today. So we do have a question in our chat that has a couple of subparts. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our team member, Tracy Preville, who will be facilitating that, and then I'll wrap up with our end. So Tracy, take it away.
Hi, thanks for being here. Actually, I don't see the question anymore.
Oh, I see it. It's from Nima. It says, if you want to focus on intellectual property, what are some classes you need to take your 2L year? So I'd say if you're interested in intellectual property, you should start out just taking the basic trademark and copyright. I'd say depending on what your actual intellectual property interest is then going to dictate the courses that you take outside of copyright and trademark. If you have a biology or engineering background and you're interested in patents, then, you know, that might be an opportunity for you as well, or just a deeper dive into some of the concepts. So, you know, transactional drafting, registrations, entertainment, sports, I mean, not entertainment, music, sports, the way that I did.
I actually do want to get in another question from another viewer who was asking, if you don't have a strong undergraduate GPA but have a strong graduate GPA, would it be wise to go to the lower law school and then apply to the higher tier law school?
Great question. No, shoot for the moon. But where you need to excel at is your personal statement. So when they give you, you know how like there's always like the actual personal statement of like, why do you want to go here and be in this program? And then they always allow you to have like an additional statement. Like if there's anything else you want to talk about or explain to us, go ahead, grab the mic right there. And what you actually need to talk about in that essay is why you didn't do well in undergrad, and give a very specific explanation of why you didn't do well in undergrad, but what turned around in your life that allowed you to excel at the graduate level, right? Which should have been harder than the undergraduate level. What changed in your life that allowed you to excel at the graduate level? And why are you prepared to take on the rigors of this program because of your previous struggle and the success that you've seen there? That's what your secondary essay needs to be about. But nope, go ahead, shoot your shot. Shoot your shot at this top tier school.
Do we have time for one more, Danielle, or are we out of time?
Yeah, go ahead. We have time for one more.
So what are some, this person is asking, what are some tips to get into a company, a bigger company, if you went to a lower tier law school?
Networking. It's purely networking. I mean, Danielle can speak. I own my practice, you know, like she's at a large company. I know how the entertainment industry works. Just like she said, a lot of times things don't get posted. They're internal referrals. That's absolutely going to be networking. Like somebody absolutely needs to know your name to be able to say, oh, you know who would be great for this? So-and-so, and that so-and-so needs to be you. But that is the tip, that you really got to network so that people are speaking your name when you're not in the room, and in a good way.
No, absolutely. And I can actually speak to this question because that was me as a law student. I went to Elon University School of Law, which is not a top tier law school at all. I found myself a lot of times introducing Elon for the first time in every room that I was in. And so, you know, with that comes the challenges. But, you know, once you get into the room, right? Once you get that interview, once you get the opportunity and that cover letter to really let them know that despite the university that I attend, these are my goals. This is what I've been doing about them, right? This is how I have been pursuing my dream job. These are the steps that I've taken. That's when you're able to shine. And so, you know, I would never tell you a student who doesn't go to a top tier school not to apply somewhere. I applied everywhere. Okay, I applied to the big companies in the industry. I applied New York, LA. You know, I was flexible, and I think you should not limit yourself just because you go to the school that you go to. There'll be enough people trying to limit you, you know, and tell you that it's going to be too hard, or, you know, that it's not an option because we don't have alumni there. Become that first alumni, right? I'm the only second person in my school's history to work at Universal, and one of less than a handful that even live in New York. So, you know, as a law student, I didn't let that stop me. I just applied, honestly. with the networking piece, it's extremely important. That's how I got my internship at Universal, was through networking. With my second internship, I was at Spotify. I promise I did not do any tricks, any frills. I honestly went to the Spotify website and put an application in. I know a lot of people say, you know, you don't really get a lot of bites on just cold applying, but I did. I didn't even tell my supervisors at Universal that I was applying. I just put it in. I said, let's see what happens, right? And I got the job. And that was the first time somebody in my law school's history got an internship at Spotify. So I think, you know, even if you don't attend that school, just apply everywhere. Someone will be willing to take a chance, you know, because, you know, people see that if you don't go to those top tier schools, you do have to hustle a little bit harder, you know, to get those opportunities, and they respect that. And so I would say, if you see something online, just apply for it. See what happens. Apply, cast your net really wide. You know, from if it's entertainment you're looking for, do all the spheres, right? Do TV, film, and music. Go New York and LA. Everything's virtual right now. So location is not really a pigeonhole for you, as much as it would have been for me, who had to relocate on my own dime for these internships. So that would be my advice, would just be to go for it. Honestly, don't let your school stop you. So I know we're at time. We have a few more questions in there, but thank you so much, Shay, for taking the time to speak to us today, for pursuing the Esquire. I appreciate you giving up your time and sharing all the great advice to our viewers. Can you let us know how our viewers can stay connected with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just gonna say I'll drop my social handles in the chat.
Great.
I am Shay M Lawson on all social platforms: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Clubhouse. My website is shamlawson.com. And you guys can always reach out to me. Please reference that this is where you are connecting with me from, because that will actually move you faster through the queue if I didn't, because I do see that there are a bunch of questions. And Mariana, even when you apply, if you want me to read your personal statements, I'll definitely review them for you. So I want you to.
Of you.
I want you to go. I want you to definitely apply for this school. But yeah, definitely, everybody, please stay in touch.
Again, thank you so much, Shay. Definitely connect with her. We on Instagram, we do have her handles listed in our post with the hyperlink. So if you want to just tap on those things to keep in touch with Shay, we definitely encourage you to do that. Again, thank you all for viewing and supporting Pursuing the Esquire and our Legal Lifeline series. Stay tuned for announcements for our next episodes coming next month, as well as our upcoming application cycle for those of you who are interested in being a part of our mentorship program. Follow us on Instagram. We are on LinkedIn. This episode will be viewed on our YouTube channel tomorrow if you want to watch a playback, or you want to share it with a friend who wasn't able to make it today. Stay safe, everyone, and thank you so much. Have a great night.
Everybody, thanks for having me.